Welcome back. You're watching KTN Business Today. My name is Abi Agina. Well, let's take you now to that conference which we were covering from yesterday that ends tomorrow. Well, Kenya is for the first time hosting the third International Internal Auditors Conference to discuss matters to do with corporate governance and enhancing transparency in the auditing process. Well, KTN Business Today interviewed IIA Global President Richard Chambers on the sidelines of the conference. Well, this was a bit earlier. Many thanks for joining us. We are here at the KICC, where the third African International Institute of Internal Auditors Conference is happening. It has already been opened by the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto, who made very touching remarks about what needs to be done in the auditing profession. And joining me right now is Richard Chambers, who is the President and the CEO of IIA Global, just to help us dissect some of the issues that have been up for discussion here at the conference. Many thanks, Richard, for joining us. Let's kick off with this conference having started today. What are some of the key outcomes that you envisage to achieve out of it?
This is a very important event that is designed to gain regional growth in the internal audit profession. There are more than 500 internal auditors here from more than 25 countries around the world. So it's going to be a great event, one where they'll learn and develop opportunities around risk and control and governance.
So Richard, looking at the role of internal auditors, there's a misconception that they are the people who come to smoke out malpractices in companies. Perhaps, what is the changing role of the modern day internal auditor?
I think internal audit adds the most value when it helps companies avoid those kind of problems to start with. By looking at and giving management and the board assurance that the controls are well designed and that they're working as intended. Only when those controls fail and they're not designed or implemented correctly do you end up with fraud and corruption.
Looking at the African scenario, we are seeing a lot of funding coming through. Companies are setting up shop in Africa. There's more need for proper structures in place, the need for better internal auditing. As an institute, what are some of the key projects that you have lined up for Africa?
Well, I can tell you that it's a huge priority for IIA Global. In fact, it's one of the reasons I'm here this week, is we have a major initiative to help our institutes from across Africa. And we have institutes and IIA institutes in 24 countries. And we're trying to help them grow and better serve the profession in their countries. So we've been meeting for the last 2 days with them here to help them.
And before we let you go, Richard, looking at issues around corporate governance, to be precise, Kenya has had a few issues here and there where we're seeing directors just contravening the internal guidelines when it comes to managing the company. What's your assessment of corporate governance in the continent? And if you could also comment on the Kenyan scenario.
Well, let me say to start with, I think that corporate governance is a challenge around the world. It's not limited to Africa, certainly not limited to Kenya. What we strongly advocate from the Institute of Internal Auditors is that there be a strong code of corporate governance and that companies adhere to best practices and best principles, have strong independent boards of directors, strong audit committees, and sort of maintain some separation between management and that board.
Of course, this issue of corporate governance remains quite a touchy subject. Have we seen a deliberate attempt where a lot of attention is being given to boosting corporate governance in institutions? We know of institutions that rarely really practice good corporate governance. Is there still hope around that?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. We see very strong practices in corporate governance coming from other countries within the region. Down in South Africa, they have the King Code. They're updating that now to the 4th edition. These corporate governance codes, I think, can be great guidelines for companies and for listing agencies and others to follow in ensuring strong and effective corporate governance.
Many thanks, Richard. Before you wrap up, we know the conference is ending on Friday. What sort of climax should you expect, and what sort of message would you like to send out there to the world?
Well, I think everyone needs to better appreciate what internal audit is and what it can do. I think strong and effective internal audit fosters confidence by investors in the private sector. Strong internal audit in government fosters stronger confidence by citizens and taxpayers in government. So internal audit really is kind of a beacon of trust.
Many thanks there. We've been speaking to Richard Chambers, who is the Global President and the CEO of IIA Global, speaking to us on the backdrop of the ongoing conference happening here at the KICC. It is expected to end on Friday. A lot of discussions already happening, a lot of feedback coming in from different participants from over 27 countries, talking about 565 people represented. Do keep it KTN for more updates from this end of the side. Back to you in studio. Well, like I said, that one was done a bit earlier on. Of course, make a date and attend the Internal Auditors Conference happening at the KICC. A lot of issues up for discussion around how can corporate governance be improved in organizations, the role of senior managers in trying to assist the internal audit department. Well, away from that, we want to quickly sample some of your feedback regarding our Twitter poll question today, and we will be having some of the tweets shortly appearing on the screens on what some of you have mentioned. Well, our question today was, what are some of the issues you would have liked to see being discussed at the World Economic Forum? And that is the question there, as you can see it. What exists as a continent that shouldn't be left out at the World Economic Forum on Africa? That was our focus question for today. And we've been receiving a lot of feedback through my colleague's Twitter handle at Joy Doreen Bira. And let's now sample some of your feedback and what you had to say regarding the ongoing discussions at the World Economic Forum in Rwanda, Kigali. Rafael Obonyo asking, youth unemployment is especially perilous, and he is concerned about the youth. Of course, quite a pertinent question there. The other Twitter we're getting is from Stephen, high cost of production, unequal trade balances, and its minimal trade with itself, and how can it value add its products? Let's move on to the next Twitter feedback we're getting in. Economic policies must be elucidated to the layman to understand their impacts in and their whereabouts. That is Kaz Oman Emmanuel. Well, and with that Twitter poll, that's how we wrap up KTN Business today. My name is Abia Gina. Coming up next is News Hour.